Welcome back. In this episode, we're talking all about private podcasting. We're going to dig into how it differs from traditional public podcasting, and we're also going to talk about the benefits for both creators and their audience.
You're listening to this episode. Maybe you're a private podcasting pro. Maybe you're here because you're like, I got this and I want to see what else they can add. Or maybe you're like, what the heck is private podcasting? And if you fall into that latter camp, we're going to get into some of those details. The beginning of talking about private podcasting is talking about how it is compared to public podcasting. People who are listening to this are listening to a public podcast. What that means is anyone could go into what is called a podcatcher app, something like Apple or Spotify, or probably a player that you listen to. Those apps, basically, most of them talk to Apple, but they essentially are collecting information, and you type in an episode or a title or the show name and the podcast will pop up, right? So it is public and out there for anyone to listen to. And that is awesome. And public podcasting is super great. Obviously, there's lots of different types of podcasts, but they typically do the format of a weekly show. And it's a show in that it's produced usually pretty well. Lots of things are tied to what a public podcast might look like. But again, it's very public and it's for anyone to listen to. So let's contrast that with private podcasting. So it's kind of like it sounds. It's private. Okay. So we put it behind a wall. And I think one of the main layers of security that means is it's not searchable. So you could not search what's one of our products. Attract with Audio, how to create an audio lead magnet. If you type in your podcast player right now, Attract with Audio, it is not going to come up. And that is because our people have paid for that product. It's actually a paid audio course that we sell at Hello Audio. And so what's cool about that is one layer of security. No one can find the content on the internet. But then we get a little bit deeper at Hello Audio because if someone's paying for that content, I want to know who's listening and if they're allowed to have access, right? And so what we did at Hello Audio is we've tied the RSS feed, a unique link to that episode to that podcast, and it is associated with an email address. And so then in my Hello Audio account, I can see how many people have subscribed to that private podcast. And that adds a whole layer of being able to see analytics, being able to turn off or disable the feed, meaning they don't get any more episodes or the feed disappears completely. And you would do that for various reasons. Someone asks for a refund or someone stops paying if it's monthly, or there's various reasons. You don't want someone in your program anymore more for someone, whatever reason. Or it was a launch event and they're only supposed to have access to the podcast series for a week. And so you can create urgency for people to listen. So that's the core difference. Searchable, it's not searchable, it's behind a protection. Now, I talked about it as it relates to paid, but of course you could do that for free content like I mentioned with the launch or a masterclass or something like that, or a lead magnet. At Hello Audio, we teach people how to create lead magnets that are private podcasts. And you don't have to charge for it, but there is a level of protection, a layer of not everyone gets this or not everyone can have access. And so that means if I didn't sign up for that podcast, I actually can't get it. And so even if Nora signed up for a podcast and she shared it to me and says, hey, listen to this episode from Lindsay's $1,000 course, it would not play on my phone. And so that's like the main difference, I would say. Nora, do you have any other commentary on the differences?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest one is in terms of the access. I think the next biggest difference is in the delivery. We have because we're doing private podcasts, we have a lot more control in terms of how the content is delivered to your audience. With a public podcast, it is published on a specific day for everyone. Everyone gets it at the same time on the same day. But you don't have to do that with private podcasts. Can you? Absolutely. You can absolutely publish your content just like a public podcast. So on a day, everybody gets it who's subscribed or has opted in or has purchased that private podcast. you don't need to. So the cool part about private podcasts is you can now, especially on Hello Audio's platform, you can now choose to deliver it in a different way. So maybe you want to have an evergreen, maybe it's an evergreen challenge or an evergreen 30-day meditation challenge, whatever that might be for your business. You might want to say day one gets delivered to Lindsay because she opted in today. So today is her day one. Next week, I find it, or Lindsay refers like, hey, I'm listening to this. This is really good. And my day one is next week. So we could actually be getting the same content, but according to different schedules based on the day that we chose to raise our hand and opt in or purchase your product. So you can, as we call it, this internet marketing space in an evergreen type of way. You can also, like if you have an old show that's been published on Netflix and you want to binge it, or if you have a course and all of your videos are already done, you can actually put it all in the feed and it can just be bingeable. So you can make it instantly available where everyone can see it in order, right? Module 1, module 2, especially if you're not teaching live. Obviously, you're teaching live, you're going to maybe do date-based because your calls would then be in order and people would know when the next call would be. So you have some options in how you deliver the content with private, a lot more control over that than you do like.
And that's because of that email address, right? So with a public podcast, hopefully we have millions of listeners to this, but we don't know who these people are at all. And which is frustrating. And so until someone raises their hand and signs up for some opt-in that we post on the show, then we can start to see who's listening, right? And so we'll play around with that on the show and you'll see it. And I think one cool thing that we do at Hello Audio too, that because we have that email address, is we allow you to segment listeners and tag them internally so I can know that Nora bought Attract with Audio, right? The product that I mentioned. And so maybe she doesn't get the ad spot that I put in the front or at the back because she already owns it. She gets a different one, right? So you can get that nuanced with it because, again, we have that identifier, that email address. We also have the identifiers of names. And so at Hello Audio, we've added the ability to personalize, just like email, right? Where you do the F name in the brackets and talk to the person. We do that in Hello Audio. So your name can show up in the title of an episode or in the description, which I think is really cool. So those kind of personalization features are, I think, make private podcasting something super valuable. That's a question we get a lot. Why shouldn't I just make this a public podcast if I want everyone to listen? Why would I create a private one? And that it is that layer of analytics that is unparalleled, right? But when you get into a public podcast, of course we want people to share this. Of course we want everyone to listen. But truly integrating private is a way, I think, what's really cool with a public podcast, you already know people like that medium. So then you're like, great, you want to listen to this very targeted private podcast series on XYZ. Now you're getting those people to raise their hand. And now they're engaged potential customers or engaged leads or whatever language you use. And that's what private podcasting can offer in contrast to a very public and a very open show. So this is a great traffic source as long as you're getting traffic here. It's also a great conversion tool because we're definitely selling Hello Audio on this, right? But how do we know who's going where, right? People raising their hand and saying, you have to take another step. There is one more step after a public podcast for sure. But yeah, that's the definition and the difference between private podcasting. Nora, why don't we dive into some of the benefits for people that are creators?
I love it. And actually, the analytics is a huge benefit for creators, right? Because now you have actionable data. So unlike a public podcast where maybe you just see download counts, I mean, yeah, that'll tell you what maybe episodes were most interesting to your existing audience, but you can't reach them. Because private podcasts are tied to that email address, now we can take action with that data. So if Lindsay downloaded my episode that I created on some specific topic, I can actually send now triggers or actions based on her listening behavior. And that is something you can't do with public podcasts. So that's a huge benefit to creators because not only do they have more insight into who specifically is listening and when they're listening, they can actually take action on that data. So if I notice that Lindsay downloaded that special episode that I created, I could tag her with a specific episode in that feed just for people with that tag. to reward them maybe for downloading that episode, or to encourage or to take the next step, right? Whether you just podcasted your webinar and they actually consumed it and you're like, this person is a hot lead. Now I can do something with it. So that's a really huge benefit for creators. And that's something that you don't get from public podcasts that you now get podcasts. So that's one of the biggest benefits, especially when you're talking about getting leads, getting sales, and just being able to understand your audience and really tailor the content to what they need, right? So this is personalization, individualization, which is really big, and it's not going to get any smaller. This is only going to get more and more important as the number of AI contents and all this stuff is flooding the marketplace. Being able to tailor content is going to be really key. So there's that. I think the other thing we talked about is that it's just so much easier to create.
Oh my God, it's so much easier.
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, and how much pressure did we feel as creators? It's always like content.
I mean, even the decision for this, can we even?
Oh my gosh, yes.
You guys, we don't have a video podcast, but we're going to record video for some of the social. Like, we feel the pressure. We totally feel the pressure. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, when we created other assets, like we have the audio course creation where we teach people how to create audio courses. And that asset, I think what people really, you don't have to do your hair. You don't have to do your makeup. You can do it at 3 a.m. if that's when your house is quiet and that's when you feel like recording. And you don't have to worry about the weird nuances of editing video where maybe you put your hair up in a ponytail, or maybe you change shirts, or the lighting was different. It looks all wonky.
Sunset, yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh, it's so much easier. And honestly, when it comes to interacting with our audiences, especially if you're looking at taking what's happening in the world and relating it back to what's relevant today with your audience, especially as things are changing so quickly, rapid content creation is really important for creators, and being able to do it in an easy way that fits their schedule is huge. So I think just easier creation is a big one.
I think with video is such a block for people, and for some people are just so amazing at it and can show up in different ways. And there's layers to that. And some people are really good writers. So there's these blocks that people have where you're just like, oh, I hate the way I type, or like looking at a blank page is it's not good. And then it's like you get into cameras and I don't know what camera to buy and blah, 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 right? I don't know how to do my makeup. I mean, there's so many blocks, but talking is literally the easiest. And anyone who's created a podcast knows, which is why we wanted to create this podcast, because we're like, okay, we should probably do this, because it's for me, at least in my prior business as a course consultant, when I was running that, was a product I had, Academics Mean Business. It was the easiest form of content creation for me. I just showed up, I interviewed people, and then my team did other stuff after on the end. And it was just like so easy for me. And, I think when you remove blocks like that to help people create, and now we have ChatGPT, which I never would have imagined, which is a whole other story. But the idea of just doing it and not being blocked by it. And sure, Nora and I have decent mics. We've been doing this a while, but your phone or your phone's voice memo app is actually not that bad. And so the idea that you could record something super quick and get it and connect with your audience or create that revenue stream, because that's the piece that if you can remove stuff like that and make it easy, you're really helping business owners move forward. And we love that. And that, it's funny because I look back on everything I did up until this point with Hello Audio, Build a Better Beta. That was my whole premise, was you don't have to record the videos for your course. Just go teach. Guess what? Everyone can talk. And so if we create that content, while the pressure of a public show showing up every week can be daunting, there is this in between where like we talked about in another episode of anyone can have a show. It just doesn't have to be a public one. Now we're in the behind the scenes or recording something for your team. There's so many things you can do with it. And I always like to talk about too, the switch out that is so easy. If an episode doesn't land or the internet changes, Threads comes out and you have to add a new social media platform, it's so easy to swap something with audio. Hello Audio, you literally replace the media file and it will update in everyone's apps and that'll be the next one that they play. So good. Versus going into the members area, adding the new video, blah, blah, blah. So much more effort, re-recording or splicing out the part that wasn't right. audio just, oh God, it makes it so much. We could have a whole episode on that
It's
alone.
so true. Video feels so heavy.
It's
For
so
all those
heavy.
reasons.
So does
Like, oh,
writing.
this is so much easier. And because we've been there, because we've created content for our businesses, because we've created courses and had coaching programs and things like that, we want to make it easier. So we do have integrations with like Dolby.io, for example. So if I'm inspired and I'm sitting at the soccer field and I just take my phone out, maybe the audio is not the best, fine. Maybe there's some background noise, there's cheering or wind or whatever. I can actually just record it. I can upload it to Hello Audio. I can hit a little button and it cleans the audio for me. I mean, you can't do that necessarily as easy or as fast with video. And I think we've personally really dedicated a lot of integrations and tools to make it easier for creators to get their content out there. And I think that's a really big deal. And why, right? Yes, for all these reasons. Also because it increases engagement with their audience. And I mean, you and I both know as the noise online is insane. It's only getting worse, right? And so how do we really reach and connect with our audience? That's a game changer when it comes to building a business because we all know business is more than a transaction, right? It's a relationship. And so we have to really do what we can to connect with our people in this crazy space where no one has time and everybody is busy. Audio lets you reach people in those little pockets of time during the day when they are not sitting at their screen, which, by the way, not many people really want to sit at their screen any longer than they're already doing that. So now we're able to reach them in those pockets of time. So not only is it easier to create, now it's actually easier to reach your people. It's easier to connect with people. They hear your voice in their ears. That's very intimate. That's a very intimate situation. And now you're creating stronger relationships with your audience, and you're also creating more engagement, no matter what that content is, whether it's marketing content or whether it's your course content or a coaching call replay, which actually is the next benefit, right? And that goes to selling, because I know I've been on the back end of a lot of different launches in my career. And one of the biggest things, if you ever sell in a coaching program where there's a live element, whether you're doing live coaching calls or you're teaching live, one of the biggest hesitations that people have to buying that product, I can't make the calls. I'm busy. And guess what? No matter what time you're going to make it, it's either going to be super inconvenient for you or inconvenient for other people. There's no time during the week where everyone's going to magically be able to make it. And so being able to create all of these replays and put the content in a private podcast to make it easier to consume actually directly addresses that sales objection, which is a huge benefit for creators when they're trying to sell their products. It's being able to sell, whether it's pure audio or whether you're using audio to supplement the course or the coaching, it will directly affect your bottom line. We've seen it time and time again with so many of our users. They've been able to grow their revenue by adding audio in those places, whether it's more sales, because more sales and conversions, or even if they're using it in their marketing, again, more sales and conversions. So that's a huge benefit for creators that not many people took. Really, audio does that? Yes, audio does that. It's a big deal.
And I think my big sum up of the benefits for creators is it's the easiest thing for the highest amount of ROI. That's the perfect combo where you're just like, it's actually easier for you to create and it's going to have a good ROI on both the relationship side and the revenue side, which is huge. So so let's talk about the audience, right? The listeners. How does it actually benefit them? We've touched on it, right? Because it's this symbiotic relationship. The creator and the listener, the audience are two sides of the same coin. And so the idea that it benefits the listener, they can consume the content on their own schedule, in the environment that they choose, in the way that they choose. And this is the thing that's special about audio. And it has to do with, I'm going to grab my headphones that I'm not wearing for this, these noise canceling headphones, man. These are the things that I think make audio really special. And it's because when you put them on, literally the world is canceled. So if you're the person that they choose as they look at their podcast player and they open it and they're like, oh, I could listen to Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy and that's great. And I listen every week, but I also just bought, right now you're literally being put aside someone like Amy Porterfield, and they're choosing you, right? And that is tied to that engagement. Engagement doesn't just mean back and forth, because like maybe you're like, well, they're not engaged with me, like they can't write me. And well, they can. And I know it's not a social app, that podcasting, but what is cool about it is that engagement is the consumption piece, because when they learn from you and they connect that, whatever you do for them, that transformation or that thought that they've never had, or that motivation or inspiration that they've never had, that's really powerful and really deep. And that is engagement. And so when they associate that win that they get, they associate with you, that's a positive for you and your brand. So yeah, this idea that your podcast player is an inbox and you're waiting there, your face, whatever your course or program is, reminding them that they bought it or that they signed up for it, they have that carved time. And this is where audio is really special. There's audio time for people. I've heard people say it's my sacred audio time. And it's because it's tied to a habit, where video, right? Scrolling TikTok is when I'm binging Vanderpump Rules, which is not a good, it's not a good content time, right? I'm half watching a show on Netflix. I'm half playing with my phone. I'm buying shit online. This is not I'm engaged changing my lifetime. And so the cool thing about audio is it's connected to something. It's connected to getting ready in the morning. It's connected to a drive. It's connected to a walk and getting a reset. It's connected to working out, house chores. And it serves a special place. Like at our house, Derek will go and take a walk, and he does it so he can listen to a podcast, right? And so sure, maybe it's a weekly show, but we're saying at Hello Audio, it could also be your content that someone's paid for, and they juggle it, and that's okay. But that's powerful to put on headphones and say, I'm not listening to whatever, I'm focused. That is so different than catching a TikTok video, than signing into a course platform. Like we don't do that when we're chilling. So that's the power of audio. And it's like you said earlier, it's very intimate. There's something special about, and they're studying this immersion, I think they call it, where there's audio coming in and you're doing something else. And the way that audio comes in is processed very different than watching a video and listening. It's just different. And so when your voice and your content is that thing, that connection is like unparalleled, I think, versus other types of content.
Yeah, I like how when we have listeners that consume these private podcasts, they feel like they know us. It feels like
the
they
same
are
for a public podcast for that. When I had a public podcast, again, interviewing other academics who started jobs, and there was someone locally who was an adjunct professor, and she was like, hey, can we meet up? Because I lived across the street from her community college. And I was like, sure. We sit down. She's like, I feel like I've already had coffee with you. And and anyone who has a podcast, I think it's the same possibly for YouTube, but YouTube is very like production. And it like, I do feel like I know some people that I watch maybe on Reels, like like in stories, there's maybe a little bit more of their personal life, but there is something different about a podcast where that visual aspect doesn't need to be there. So I don't have preconceived notions about, I don't know, how perfect their house looks or whatever, because it's just audio. And so the barriers are more down, I think. And it is cool. It does feel like, because it hits that part of your brain, it feels like you're sitting there at a coffee shop with them. Again, because of that attention, I think, and because of the way that information is taken into your brain, essentially.
Absolutely. I love that. And when the listeners are happy, creators are happy.
Of course.
And there's that too.
So I think the bottom line, if we were to tie a bow with the listener piece, because Lindsay went on a rant there, it's all about higher consumption is higher value. And they associate that because they consume it. You have to have good content too, let's be honest. But all our users, again, that type of person that we attract cares about their content, cares about their listener. But yeah, that higher consumption equals higher value for them. And that, again, happy customer, happy creator. And that's a positive for everybody for sure.
Absolutely. So if you're thinking about it, definitely check it out. And if you have an existing course, if you have an existing marketing material or marketing content, throw it in a private podcast and test it to see if consumption goes up, see if conversions go up, because I think you'll be surprised at what it does.
Totally. And again, it's so easy. What can it hurt? Yeah. Hopefully this episode was helpful in the explanation of the difference between private and public podcasting, which we dove in. And then, of course, the huge amount of benefits for both creators and for their audience. That two-sided thing, super powerful. I think that's about it we got on this topic. I'm sure this will sneak up in other ways. I probably have, even just in talking, I was like, oh, that's an idea for an episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. So thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you on the next one. And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up.